Hi everyone, this is Mr. Zoeller, and today I'm going to be presenting you a screencast on Northern opposition to the war during the Civil War. So our goal for this video is that as a student you should be able to summarize the opposition to the war within the Northern or the Union states. So the Northern Democrats, who were in the House and in the Senate or in the state governments in the North, who opposed the war, got the nickname of Copperheads, which they were viewed by the Republican enemies after they were seen as a poisonous snake, as you can see here in this picture. So many Copperheads lived in the western states and were opponents of the abolition of slavery, so they were not in favor of getting rid of slavery, or they were worried about competition from black workers. So they're afraid that if African Americans more of them are free and there aren't slaves anymore, that they're going to take jobs away from white Americans because they might be willing to take a lower pay than a white worker would. So here's some drawings representing the opposition of the Copperheads to the idea of liberty here and freedom in the United States. And remember, these are all people that are in the North that we're looking at today. And so here's another drawing. So if you want to pause, you can take a look at those. As casualties grew, Lincoln was forced to introduce a draft to get more soldiers. The difference between volunteering for the military and having a draft is when you volunteer, you can sign up yourself to go and fight for the military. If there's a draft, that means the country is forcing men of a certain age to serve in the military. So it's not voluntary, it is mandatory. And the draft would basically work like a lottery where they would, normally when we think of a draft, they would choose people that have been born in a certain month of a certain year. At least that's how it was for the Vietnam War at one point. Now, the draft wasn't completely fair, though, however, because if you had $300, you could actually pay the government to get out of the draft. And so that means that rich families are going to be able to get their kids to not have to go and fight in the war, while poor families are not going to be able to do that. Because to get out, it costs about $300, which back then, if you had like a regular job, an ordinary worker, not a wealthy person, that's about a year pay. And of course, you need to use that money to feed your family, take care of getting clothing and where you're living. And this is going to cause a lot of Northerners to be upset with President Lincoln because they don't see this as being fair. They believe if it's a draft, you shouldn't be able to get to pay your way out of it. And in July of 1863, so this will be taking place after the Battle of Gettysburg is over and after the Emancipation Proclamation in the beginning of this year, we're going to have riots breaking out in New York City, the largest city in the North in the United States. And we're going to have thousands of people rioting over this draft, and they're angry because they don't feel it's fair that the common people have to go and fight while the rich people can get out. And they're also angry that since the Emancipation Proclamation has been proclaimed, that perhaps these free blacks now, the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of them in the South, might come to the North and take their jobs away and work for less. And so they're worried about their jobs, they're worried about the military draft, and that's going to lead to these huge attacks. So in New York City alone, we're going to have draft offices attacked, where it would be basically office buildings where they're deciding who's going to be serving in the military in this draft. And then also African Americans that are there in New York are going to be targeted as well, even though they had nothing to do with taking jobs away or anything like that. And so around 2,000 people are going to be killed in these riots in New York and 5,000 wounded. So we have a lot of anti-war sentiment or feelings beginning to develop here in the North. So as more and more people are dying, Lincoln needs more soldiers to take their place, and so people are going to begin to turn against this war. So here's a campaign kind of picture about volunteering, so you can take a look at that. And then here's some drawings representing the attack in New York with these riots. And the Union Army had to be called in to stop these attacks. So you can see different police officers and different groups of people here. African Americans, as I said, were targeted in these riots because they're white workers who were afraid of them taking their jobs. And many of them were killed. So we have this guy here who's been hanged and being set on fire. And these are just some of the atrocities that took place in New York City. All right, I want you to go ahead and pause the video after this and answer the questions that follow. This is Mr. Zoeller. Have a good day. Bye-bye.